So thank you very, very much, all of you, for coming along to LWN in conversation with Emily Thornberry, Sister Solicitors. Now, this is a little bit of artistic license because, of course, Emily is a barrister by training and not a solicitor. But any of you who have ever done LWN's public speaking training will be aware that I am a big fan of alliteration and an equally big fan of a memorable noun phrase. So hashtag Sister Solicitors is indeed the hashtag for tonight's debate. If you would like to tweet about it, we would of course encourage a sisterly use of both social media and the chat functions. But I have been so excited in the run up to tonight's event because Emily really is one of the most plain speaking, the most fabulous, the most impressive politicians, I think, of our generation. And I am equally delighted that we are joined by Abtisam, who is such a rising star in the movement. Bear with me one moment, apologies. I'm just going to mute anybody whose feed is causing a disturbance. So as many of you will know, Emily is of course currently the Shadow Attorney General. We're going to explore a little bit more about what that role means over the course of this evening. Particularly interesting, I think, in a time where the current government shows total disregard for certain aspects of the current law, and has previously been Shadow Foreign Secretary and Shadow Trade, so had some huge briefs in the party. She I think has an upbringing that many people on the call are likely to be able to relate to. When your high-flying dad left family home, leaving your mum to manage as a single parent and navigate the joys of the welfare state. So we'll be really interested to explore some of your personal narrative and lived experiences tonight, Emily, as I know they inform your passion for policy very, very neatly. Abtisam, many of you will be aware, is a senior councillor in Sheffield. She is, to our great excitement, Labour's parliamentary candidate for the seat of Sheffield Central. If she is elected, which I'm sure she will be, because we're not planning on losing any seats at the next general election, she will be the first parliamentarian of Yemeni descent. Abtisam's dad was a steel worker in Yemen. She herself had a working class upbringing in Sheffield. Sadly not served very well under Thatcher and Major's education system and left school with 4 GCSEs, but then flourished under a Labour government, determinedly trained first both as a teacher and then as a lawyer, and went on to found her own legal centre advising vulnerable residents in Sheffield on all aspects of legal affairs. And we are particularly proud that she is a graduate of the Jo Cox Women in Leadership scheme, and there are now several graduates of that programme that we are proud to run in conjunction with the party, already on the green benches, and several more standing at the next general election. So we are super proud to see that army of feminist change makers doing their thing and heading to great heights and leading change at all levels in the party. I am filling ever so slightly to give Emily a chance to catch her breath, because I know that you've just been voting in the Commons and then cycling home in time to join us this evening. So we do really, really appreciate the efforts that you've taken to join us tonight, both Emily and Abtisam. And without further ado, there will be opportunity for questions later on, sister, so you can either put them in writing in the chat, and I'll do my best to help fish them out for Emily and Abtisam later, or you can raise your hand at the time. We'll make sure we allow plenty of time for people to engage. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Abtisam Mohammed. Thanks, Abtisam.
Lovely, thank you, Claire. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this evening, and it's an absolute pleasure. Really excited to be able to interview informally Emily today. You know, I've watched Emily do many interviews on the telly, so now being able to have this conversation directly is very exciting for me. So Emily, I've read quite a bit about your background and the challenges that you've experienced growing up, and I can relate to a lot of that as well, having had my own challenges growing up. what extent do you think that the everything that you've gone through, your early years, has defined your path towards politics, and how do you think it's influenced the input that you've had as well in the party?
Thank you. Can I just thank Labour Women's Network for having me, and I've been looking forward to this as well. And Claire, you're really kind. Thank you very much for everything you've said. And I'm thrilled, Abtisam, that you've been selected for Sheffield Central, and have spoken to the current incumbent, who was the first person to tell me all about you. So he's really exciting as well. So I hope that you'll be joining us on the green benches very soon indeed. I mean, let's hope we have a general election soon, and let's hope that you're elected. Yeah, I mean, I had quite a difficult upbringing, and certainly, you know, I remember being thrown out of the house by the bailiffs, and going into social housing, and my mum struggling on benefits, and people would arrive with kind of food parcels, and I had free school dinners. And in those days, you had to queue up separately for free school dinners to those who like paid for their dinners. And there were kind of a whole range of sort of different issues. And we had the 11 plus where I lived, and I failed the 11 plus, and I went to a secondary modern. And so I do have an understanding, I think, because of those sorts of experiences, and a lot more of sort of low expectations, of struggle, and how very difficult it is to cut through, and how very difficult it is to get the polish. You know, I mean, I think that was the thing when I went to the bar. I didn't have the polish. I didn't have the, you know, I used to smoke roll-ups, and everybody like stared at me, and I didn't know there was anything about that, you know. I mean, I found out there was like this woman who didn't get a tenancy in a chambers because somebody had seen her eating a Kit Kat in the street, and that wasn't kind of on. I mean, it's like, it was just such a culture shock for me, going from my background to all of this, and I found that really hard, and I had to learn really fast. But I, you know, I was very chippy, and I had a lot I wanted to prove, and that probably meant that I was quite hard work. And when I come across sort of chippy, hard, you know, women who are hard work, young women who I kind of try and breathe and just remember that I was just as bad, if not worse, when I was their age, you know, and to give them a bit of space, in a way that people didn't kind of, that many people give me that much space. But, you know, there are good people in this, you know, who need to be given a chance. My mum was a Labour councillor, and so I was kind of born into the Labour Party, basically. I mean, what had happened was that the councillor who'd helped us to get into social housing, when I got on her feet, said to her, well, now that you're sorted out, you know, you ought to pay back, and you should stand for the council. And that's what she did. And she represented the council estate that I was brought up on, and was an outstandingly good councillor. Everybody says that. And I learnt a lot from her, basically, about the importance of representing a community and the work that it entails. But I think that probably, just in terms of my own self, I think over and above everything else, being aware of how hard things had been for me in the past means that it's kind of easier for me when things are difficult, because I kind of know that I've got through worse in the past, and that, you know, that kind of acknowledgement of my own toughness has really sort of helped me with my knowing that I can get through things, knowing that I won't crumble. It'll be all right. I can get through this, you know, bring on the next.
I like that. I like the fact that we can climb mountains, and we judge sort of the next mountain based on how hard the previous mountain was that we've gone through.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you think that that's influenced sort of your politics as well, the challenges that you've had?
Oh, sure. Oh, no, sorry. Sorry, that goes without saying. I mean, yes. I mean, I think that a lot of my own personal experience was very unfair, but I was lucky, and that's what it was. And other people, you know, didn't have the luck I had, and it's not right. And, you know, to have people judge me you know, in the way that they did. Oh, she'll never get anywhere, or she'll be. I mean, my careers teacher told me that when I asked him what I was going to do with my life, he said to me, well, I could always visit people in prison. Well, I did, but not quite in the way he thought. You know, I was a barrister and I visited them in prison, but, you know, I wasn't some gangster's mole, which presumably he thought I was going to end up being. So, yeah, so I think that, you know, the way that our society is structured and the way that there are so many barriers put in the way, and potentially that we lose so much as a country because there are people with, you know, huge potential that are never able to put that into action. The way in which women are treated, the difficulties that my mother had in relation to trying to get into the labour market when she had, you know, 3 children under 7, you know, was very difficult indeed. All of those kinds of things are absolutely kind of visceral, you know, and a belief that only the Labour Party could help single parents. You know, only the Labour Party will help those who have the odds against them. Nobody else does. And that's why, you know, I dedicate my life to ensuring that we get Labour governments as often as possible. Any Labour government, I will support Labour because I'm a Labour girl, because only Labour makes positive progress socially and politically in our country. And then the Tories basically drag us back again, in my view. So, yeah, that's what I do. Yeah,
lovely. So how do you think that's characterised your politics to some extent? So do you think that, I mean, you've spoken there about sort of the will of wanting Labour to succeed, but how do you think sort of everything that you've gone through has characterised where you stand in the party and politics in general?
Yeah. So I honestly think that I come, you know, from the heart of the Labour Party, which is, you know, activists. I mean, I've been an activist much longer than I've been an MP, and I've been an MP for quite a long time. But, you know, I joined the Labour Party when I was like 17, and I became an MP when I was 45. So I'm fundamentally an activist, you know, and I was a barrister as well. So it was quite difficult and I had kids. So I couldn't really do the kind of quite classic path of becoming a councillor and then perhaps becoming a member of parliament. Instead, I was an activist. You know, that's what I did in my spare time, such as I had it. I dedicated it to the Labour Party, you know, whether it was kind of collecting subs or delivering leaflets or knocking on doors or going to demonstrations or speaking at meetings or you know, whatever it was, you know, whatever we activists do. And so I think that my view of the Labour Party is still informed by that kind of activism. You know, I believe the activists own the Labour Party. You know, it's because that's what I am in my heart, and I believe I own the Labour Party. I believe I am the Labour Party. I come from its heart, and I always will. So, I mean, what I can't bear is kind of what I'm saying. I cannot bear sectarianism. I just think it's a complete cancer in the Labour Party. I cannot bear people behaving, you know, just spending their time fighting one another instead of fighting the Tories. And I've never been somebody who would do that. And, you know, and I hope that my local party knows that. And actually, I think that we have, over the years, you know, you can kind of influence the character of your party sometimes. And I hope that the example that I've given to my party means that we are, for a London constituency, in a London constituency, we're remarkably unsectarian, which is good, because in the end, you know, yeah, you know, we disagree on 7% of policy, but what about the other 93%? You know, really, you know, it's the Tories we should be fighting. Do not expend your energy fighting one another.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you've served under many different types of leaders and you've had lots of different positions as well. And now the Shadow Attorney General. So how do you find this? What do you enjoy the most about this position? And what are you currently working on? What's the most important thing that you're working on?
So I've got a few projects that I'm working on. So there's one that I can't speak about because I haven't kind of got anywhere with it yet, and we're still kind of struggling away with it. But you know, we hope that we'll get something really good out of it. So I'm spending quite a lot of time sort of trying to sort that, and Cllr has given me some space to work on that kind of area of policy development. But otherwise, I'm taking a lead in terms of trying to craft policies on fraud. Because, you know, the last lot of stats, which I think is like something like 7 or 8 years ago, on the amount of fraud in Britain, showed that Britain suffered £198 billion worth of fraud in a year. which is more than we spend on the National Health Service. And I'm talking about kind of, you know, fraud at the level of companies, but also, you know, consumer fraud. I'm talking about, you know, elderly people being rung up at home. I'm talking about stuff on the web. I'm talking about, you know, stuff against, stuff against, you know, Department of Work and Pensions, but also, you know, against people not paying their taxes. I'm paying, you know, all the claims for COVID loans, you know, this, that, and the other, all of this, you know, and it undermines our economy and it undermines public service. And we really need to be taking it seriously. And it's like a 21st century crime that we haven't got a grip of. We've got 20th century, slightly plodding kind of criminal justice system, but we need to have a more, you know, a more appropriate way of investigating and prosecuting fraud, defending ourselves against fraud. There's a number of things that we can do, but, you know, that's kind of one of the big things I'm working on. And then the other thing I'm working on in particular is I've been asked to kind of work very closely with the government on Ukraine in terms of prosecutions and in terms of confiscation and freezing of assets. And so we've been, you know, so I've met a number of people today, a number of justice ministers from around the world, and we're trying to kind of work together to make sure that, for example, when it comes to, you know, there's lots of Russian assets that have been frozen. So then the question is, how much of it can be confiscated in order to pay reparations to the Ukrainians? And you have different jurisdictions that will have different laws. We also need to develop international law. So it's really challenging. And actually, the Ukrainians are amazing in terms of, you know, they campaign on this and they lobby really hard and they don't take no for an answer, and they continue to challenge us, and they say, you know, we may have £1 trillion worth of damage done to our country by the Russians. You know, at the end of all of this, what is going to happen? You know, I mean, you know, there are Russian assets around the world, so, you know, we want them seized. You know, why not?
Yeah. And so within your role, you're also responsible for the judicial system and making sure we've got a functioning and effective judicial system. How do you think we can work on areas which we know we're not doing so well in, like rape convictions, which are extremely low? And how do you think, if we have a Labour government, how we can drive back faith in that system?
Yeah. I mean, it's as bad as I think it's 1.6% of rapes are actually prosecuted. And those that are prosecuted and go all the way to trial take on average 1,000 days. So imagine, you know, if you are the victim of a rape, you know, your life is essentially put on hold for 3 years until you wait for your trial to come forward. And I mean, that is not, you know, and the very fact that such a tiny proportion of rape cases even come to trial at all, or even get prosecuted at all, shows that it is effectively decriminalized, as is, you know, theft from cars, as is burglaries. I mean, there's a whole range of offences that are, you know, that are still in single figures in terms of the amount of prosecutions. And this is one of the challenges that we have, and we're launching one of the pillars on Thursday. And one of the things we're talking about is, how do we get from, you know, from offence being committed to conviction at the end, or resolution at the end, and how do we stop the drop off, and how do we make sure that more offences are investigated and charged? Because, you know, there has been a drop off over the years, and so why is this happening? I mean, there's a number of things about that. So one of it is the numbers have been increased so much because of the amount of fraud, which is nearly 50% of crime at the moment, and there is really no answer to that. I mean, you're supposed to report it to action fraud. I mean, I have to say, it happened to me once, and I got some silly phone call, and I thought, I'm going to see what happens. So I then, you know, sat on the phone for 25 minutes, got through to action fraud, told them what happened. They went, oh yeah, that's happening a lot at the moment. And that was it. They didn't take my name. They didn't take any details. There was no chance that anyone was ever going to do anything about this, you know. So there's a number of things that need to, I mean, the difficulty is that the criminal justice system has been stripped out at every level, you know. And whilst the Tories may be trying to up the number of police, they are, as we know, just trying to increase police numbers, you know, very, very fast, you know, without the kind of training, without the sifting that is necessary, which is in turn causing all sorts of problems. But they don't have enough prosecutors, they don't have enough courts, you know, and so it goes on. We don't have we need to think again about our prison system. So there is a lot of kind of quite radical thinking going on at the moment as to how we can find a way through all of this. But I think it has to begin by acknowledging just how deep the problem is.
Absolutely, and Louis' cases report that came out today was extremely damning of the situation. And I think the thing that it raised for me is just how, we were talking about this 20 years ago, and we're still sort of talking about institutional barriers, institutional discrimination, homophobia, sexism, misogyny, racism. How far do you think we've really come on rights for women? And is the law on our side yet, or is there still? And I feel there's much more work that needs to be done.
There is much more work that needs to be done. But what really cheers me is that there's a younger generation of women who will not put up with it. And actually, I think my generation kind of put up with far too much. I mean, I remember, it's just a silly example, okay? But I remember I was attacked in a lift, right? Somebody kind of tried to grope me, and I rang the cops because it was in the lift in my block of flats. So I rang the cops, and they came round, and I told them all about it and so on, and they wrote it all down. And then I don't know why, but I just sort of said, yeah, well, of course, this sort of thing happens a lot, doesn't it? I mean, and then I started reading off all the other times where people have flashed at me, kind of, followed me, catcalled me, groped me, this, that. And then and I'd gone through about 5 different examples over the years of other times when I've been attacked in that way. And I saw one of the police officers looking at the other and saying, she's obviously mad. And I didn't challenge that. And I was embarrassed that I had embarrassed them by talking about all the other times. Wasn't that extraordinary? But I don't think a younger generation are prepared to put up with this. They don't put up with what we did, and we just put up with it. And we just thought, well, that's just like how it is, and the amount of kind of times that we will blame ourselves that somehow or other it was our fault as well. All of that. I'm glad to hear. I'm glad to see that my daughter would never put up with any of that nonsense. She's been brought up right. And, as have most, as far as I can see, young women, and we need to be demanding much more of the criminal justice system and certainly much more of the police.
Definitely. So coming on to so my area of work would be immigration and asylum, and the awful policy of the illegal immigration bill. And I just feel I feel it's completely vacuous. It's a complete red herring just to get people talking about the wrong area, distracting them from other things that we need to be talking about. But it feels like it's just a fight to provoke, with the UN, or attack on lawyers, constantly labeling us as lefty lawyers. And for me, it's just there's a complete disregard for not just the rule of law, but also our position on the international playing field. The disrespect for international law. The fact that we signed up to the UN Convention. How do we handle a government that just doesn't see that, doesn't respect international law, doesn't respect our sort of position historically in developing these the legislations, and prides itself on populism? How do we deal with that?
I agree with everything you've just said. So this is what we're doing, and this is why. Okay. So I mean, it's in the title, right? The illegal immigration bill. Right? They know it's illegal. They know it's illegal. It's on the front page. They know. They say, this is pushing the boundaries. We have a 50% chance of this surviving the courts. So what they're doing is they're setting this up, knowing that it won't get through the courts. And if they know it won't get through the courts, then they can be the insurgents. They can be the anti-establishment people. They can be the ones fighting the blob, and they're trying to paint us as, the establishment, the people who don't listen, the people who don't care, etc. Right? That's how they're framing it, and that's what they're hoping. I mean, I heard an immigration minister, in the second reading of this debate, getting up at the end and saying, I spoke to a man in wherever, a marginal seat somewhere, and he said to me, all we need to do is pass this legislation and the small boats will stop. You're thinking, good grief. I mean, I know he's stupid, but I mean, he's not that stupid. He knows this is not going to stop a single boat. This is not what it's about. This is about striking a pose and trying to play politics. And there will be a lot more of this in the next 18 months. So what do we do, right? Given that there are quite a lot of lefty lawyers in fairly senior positions within the Labour Party, right? Lefty lawyer and proud. But what do we do? I mean, first of all, I mean, obviously it's ridiculous, the idea that somehow or other it's lefty lawyers that are going to be the problem. The problem is the rule of law. The problem is democracy. The problem is they can't just do whatever they want, and break the law. There are certain conventions, there are international conventions, there is the Human Rights Act. There are a number of things that actually constrain them. They are not gods who walk amongst us. They can't do whatever they want to people. There are certain basic standards. And, for us as a country that has written, I mean, most of, the lefty lawyers in Britain have written an awful lot of the international law and the human rights law that, that they will be butting their heads against, of course. However, the approach that we take is this. We say, we're not going to play their game. What we're going to do is we're going to look at this legislation and see if it works. Because we all want to stop the boats. We want to stop people drowning in the channel. Right? We want to make sure that we have an immigration policy and an asylum policy which is fair, firm, and fast. It's got to work. And this bill, all this bill does is they say, if you come here on a small boat, we're not going to pay any attention to any of your needs, you're not going to be allowed to apply for anything. All we're going to do is lock you up, right? Whether you're a trafficked woman or a child or whatever, it doesn't matter. We're going to lock you up. They can't send them back, because they don't have any agreements with any countries to send people back to the countries they've come from. Okay? They don't have any space in any of the hotels because they haven't been processing any of the people who've been applying for asylum till now. I mean, the amount of cases that I have and the length of time we now wait for the Home Office to make any decision at all is outrageous. And it's because the Home Office spends its time trying to think of populist, attention-grabbing legislation and lines for their Home Secretaries to take, instead of actually just dealing with who's applied for asylum and should they be processed positively or negatively. I mean, no. So they're not going to do that. So what will happen? What will happen to all these people? They're going to lock them up somewhere. We don't even know where, because they haven't got anywhere to lock them up. Prisons are full, hotels are full. I mean, seriously, where are they going to put them? We don't know. And then what? 5 years, 10 years, 20 years go by, they're going to still be there? I mean, this isn't a solution. They're all going to go to Rwanda? I don't think so. First of all, because Rwanda is not likely to be held as legal. But even if it does, it's only going to be somewhere that will take a couple of hundred people. And we are talking of, 45,000 people a year. I mean, the other thing is, the last bit of legislation they passed, which looked very like this bit of legislation, only like 9 months ago, under the previous Home Secretary, said pretty much the same thing. And it identified 18,000 people who were not supposed to be in Britain, who were, bogus asylum seekers, blah, 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 whatever, or we're not going to pay attention to, or they've got to go back, or whatever it is. And how many of them, therefore, were deported from Britain? Out of 18,000? 21. This is the game they play. So this is what we do. We say to them, we care about the small boats policy. We care about people drowning. We want people to have safe and legal routes. We need to be able to have a proper asylum policy. This is not a proper asylum policy. This doesn't work. It's cruel. It doesn't work. You shouldn't do it.
Do you think that this is an excuse almost for them as well to come out of the European Convention on Human Rights? I feel like it is, like we're just sort of bordering onto this, that this is just another excuse for them to say, human rights are preventing us from making any legislation. It's another means for us to come out of it.
So they've got problems because, there's definitely a big lobby, and Cllr is one of the biggest lobbyists for getting out of the European Convention on Human Rights, and her mate, the Deputy Prime Minister, thinks that he's got a better version of the Human Rights Act that he wants to introduce. To which the answer always is, "Oh yeah, what rights do you want to take away then?" And they're never able to tell you that. But anyway. The problem they have is that if we pull out of the European Court of Human Rights, it is absolutely written into the Good Friday Agreement and the Agreement on Scotland and the Agreement on Wales that we have a Human Rights Act and we have access to the European Court of Human Rights. And they are in all sorts of problems in terms of Northern Ireland. And if they pull out of the European Court of Human Rights, then they pull out one of the major bricks that holds up the Good Friday Agreement. So they can't do it. So what are they going to do? They're just going to carry on playing fast and loose. They're going to carry on trying to grab headlines and coming out with the most outrageous statements and hoping that we're all so set against each other amongst ourselves that we don't notice that they are incompetent and incapable.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. So bringing us back to the party then, previous, I mean, you've worked under a number of different people, as I said earlier, but you also tried yourself to become the leader in 2020. Would you ever consider it again?
No, because I think what's going to happen is that Keir's going to get elected as Prime Minister, and hopefully, therefore, will be elected as Prime Minister for 2 terms. By which stage I will be in my dotage. We need to be somebody else by that stage.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, did you think that the party will ever have a female leader?
No, I jolly well hope so.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that sort of, you know, we've fallen behind on the Tories, and it's a shame that Labour's not sort of moved forward on that agenda.
Well, I'm not really the person to ask, am I?
All right then, okay. So, I mean, in general, whenever I've seen you, Emily, on TV, you've come across as really confident and somebody that I think, okay, that's somebody that, you know, I could aspire to be like in politics. Do you ever get nervous when you're on TV, or is it something that you just grow used to the more you do?
Yeah, no, I do get nervous. The hairs at the top of my legs stand on end. I get this sort of weird kind of sensation. But yeah, it does make you nervous, but that's good because it's your adrenaline going, and it also is evidence that you care.
Okay. Yeah. And do you think ladies,
I don't shake, thank God, but so it doesn't show. And the other thing, actually, which is as important as anything else, is that I don't show when they make me angry, and that has taken quite a lot of training to just swallow it, because if they make you angry, then you've lost. So you have to always, even if you feel angry, you mustn't let it show, and you mustn't let it affect your judgment. That's really hard. It's quite a struggle.
That's useful advice. I think that's something that I need to learn, and perhaps need a lot of media training on that area.
I've never had any media training, but I've just done lots of media. So.
Okay, to stop myself getting angry. I think I watch Question Time and watch a lot of political programs just by myself, just getting very, very angry at people on the TV.
Yes,
so,
well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you will get angry, but it's just a question of don't let it show, and be careful what you say, you know, and just channel it. You know, that's the important thing. But it is quite hard. Well, it's very hard.
Yeah. And then just about politics and the sort of the culture in general, do you think it's getting better, or do you think that the sort of everything that's happened online and the growth in sort of online culture has made it harder for women in public life?
It's a very difficult question, because, I mean, I think that Amnesty did a study of online abuse, and I think Diane Abbott came absolutely top and got more abuse than the top 10 women altogether. But I was number 2. I still get a lot of abuse, you know. I mean, I couldn't be more offensive to certain types of men, you know. I'm mouthy, you know, I'm confident, I'm overweight, I'm from Islington, I'm lefty, you know, I've got a lot to say. I mean, it's like, you know, how annoying could I possibly be? I mean, just imagine all the buttons that I press. You know, I'm quite aggressive. I don't take any shit. You know, so all of that annoys them. That annoys them a lot. And there's a lot of them out there who tell me literally just to shut up. And I'm not going to. Sometimes they literally tell me to shut up, and sometimes they just threaten me, and sometimes they do this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And I think you have a choice. I mean, I could have talked about it, you know, publicly, but I haven't really, because I really don't want to be seen as a victim, because I've never been a victim. I do the most brilliant job. I love it. I mean, I loved being a barrister. I thought there was nothing better than being a barrister until I realised that I could be an elected representative. And then I realised that was even better, you know, and it is and it's huge fun personally and enormously fulfilling. And there are downsides, you know, and yeah, you know, there have been times when, you know, I've been under threat and there have been some horrible things that have happened. But you know, I'm here. And I don't want any 15-year-old girls to look at me and think, well, it's terrible, I couldn't possibly be an MP. Well, poor Emily, look at what she goes through. I want them to see I'm having a ball. I love it, you know, and I'm making a difference. That's the approach that I want to take, you know, and I want to encourage other women to get involved in politics and give them all support and encouragement.
That's fantastic to hear. When I first made the decision to sort of raise my head above the parapet in this sort of whole selection process, the whole online abuse and everything that happens there, one of the key issues that sort of was worrying me in actual fact about whether I should.
But the point is they don't know you, right? I mean, if my friends said,
but they've always got something to say. Yeah.
If my friends said any of this stuff, or anyone I knew, I mean, there was somebody in the Labour Party who said something awful, horrible about me, actually, all about, I don't know, that I should be raped and beheaded, and I mean, just really horrible, and in kind of incitement, you know, that sort of thing, and that really upset me. I'll be honest, that upset me. And anybody, and there were some on Labour side who, you know, thought it was funny and put that on Twitter that they thought it was funny or whatever. I was upset. That upset me, but because I might have met them. But all the others, all the trolls, they don't know me. What can they, you know, I am just a symbol for them. And I'm a symbol. And actually, when I think about what kind of symbol I am, I'm pretty proud to be that symbol.
That's brilliant.
You know,
I think
let them get angry at me.
that's a good message to send out to everybody. And I think some of the comments in the chat there saying, you know, that's an example of true leadership. So I think it's a good message to send to all the young women out there, not to care about those things. How do you deal with the self-care then? Because you know, regardless of whether there's comments going on sort of online, there's still a huge amount of work that's required in Parliament, and sort of all the you know, the sort of the level of work that's required can lead to burnout. We've seen with the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda. How do you deal with self-care?
Well, when I was at the bar and had 3 kids, we used to always take August off, and 2 weeks at Christmas, and a week at Easter. And I still do that. I close my office for 2 weeks. I take a week off at Easter, and although I'm not doing that this Easter, but normally I do. And I take all of August off, basically, and I'm just not available. And it just gives me a chance to sort of switch off. So that's what I do. I mean, you know, if I had to work in August, then I would take other time off, because you have to have time off completely. And I always say that to new MPs, you know, get out of the constituency, turn the telephone off. You are not there now. You know, don't do any kind of, oh, I'll just do this visit or that visit. No. It's August. You're not there. You're not there.
That's really important to know. So how would, if we had to remember you by anything, how would you like history to record your contribution to the Labour movement? And that's a big question, but you've done so many things. You've got so many things to pick from. 90-day detention, fight for that.
Well, that was quite early. I mean, that was quite early. I don't know. I mean, I hope that we're about to go into government. And if we go into government, then, you know, I hope that I will play a leading role in that government. Obviously, it'll be matter for Cllr. But that will be the time when I'm actually able to do something, you know, and make a difference to people's lives. Because you're right. I mean, what you've alluded to, you know, my first 5 years, when I was in Parliament, we were in government. Unfortunately, there were some things I didn't agree with the government on, like 90 days detention without charge, like you know, 48 days without charge, and so it went on, 45 days without charge, and you know, I had a number of disagreements with the Labour government. I just couldn't possibly agree to that sort of thing. But I'm hoping that this Labour government will be one where, you know, we won't have these major disagreements, where we will be able to pull together, and where I hope that I will be able to play my part and make a difference to people's lives.
Really powerful. Somebody's left a message on the chat. I just want to read this out for you. It says, I'm 18 now and got involved with Labour at 13. Your journey has inspired me and has shaped my future pathway, which is lovely. What wisdom would you give to all of the individuals that are with us today, the activists, the candidates, the councillors, who are maybe thinking about beginning or, you know, within their political journey? What wisdom, words of advice would you give them?
I think the biggest one actually is what Lenin used to say. He said, if you wanted to be a political activist, if you wanted to get involved in a political party, always say yes. Whenever there's anything happening, people say, have we got any volunteers? It should always be you. Just get on with it. Just plunge right in and do it.
Lovely words of wisdom there. So we'll open out to questions now, if that's all right, Emily. So Claire, shall I just take from the audience for people that have got their hands up, or?
Yeah, there's a couple in the comments I might just group together to make life easier. Also, I just wanted to say I think there's so many lovely comments in the chat, and lots of love for both of you, Emily and Abtisam. But I particularly liked Catherine Toots' point that your list, Emily, of the attributes that particularly anger misogynist trolls about you is basically the list of reasons why the rest of us all love you and want you to carry on being exactly the same. Yeah, so the first round of questions I would loop together are all sort of around the terrible record on rape prosecutions. So Kat was asking, does the CPS threshold need to be reviewed? Janet added to that, should the 90% odd of files that have been marked for no further action be independently reviewed? And Sarah was asking, how can we address the rape myth culture within the court system, especially with so many young men consuming and fetishizing porn featuring rape and gang rape? You want to take all of those together, and then I'll speak up first.
I think that I would be concerned if we were to change the threshold, because the threshold is that there's a more than evens chance of getting a conviction or something to that effect, and that's got to be right. But I think that what we need to look at is why it is that there are so many cases where it's marked no further action. If you know, and I've spoken to the Crown Prosecution Service about this, they say that that they take, I can't remember whether it's 60 or 70% of the cases that are referred to them, rape cases that are referred to them by the police, into court, and that the drop-off rate is at the stage of women either not reporting or you know, not proceeding with the police for whatever reason, and the police not proceeding, and the police taking no further action. So what's happened has been, there's been a number of initiatives that the CPS and the police have taken, and there is now an attempt for the CPS to get involved much earlier with the police and say, right, you need to get this, you need to get that, you know, where is the evidence on this, you know, collect it now, you know, don't hold back, you know, these are the things you need to do in order to be able to successfully prosecute your case. But I think one of the things which we're really missing is something which was a Labour initiative, which has just been cut back, which is that the rape and domestic violence advisors that we used to have, that were available to help women through the process, to explain the process to them, to be there with them at court as an independent advisor and assistant to them. I think that we should be back. Bringing that, you know, we should bring those back. And I think part of the problem that we had was it was great. It was, you know, it really was making a difference. And then, you know, the Tories came in, and unfortunately, it was, you know, the funding of it wasn't really a particularly robust model. So you took a bit of funding from here and a bit of funding from there, and with all of the fundings for everywhere being cut back, it just ended up being much easier and cheaper just to cut these posts completely. And, you know, we've seen today from the report that's come out today, you know, these cases are hard. And if the police or prosecutors are under pressure, these are the easy cases to drop. And, you know, you can get a much higher conviction rate on, you know, the easier cases. And if you're, you know, it depends how these things are being measured and how you're being monitored. You know, but if you're just being monitored on the basis of what's your conviction rate, then you're going to go for, you know, the shopliftings. You wouldn't be prosecuting the more difficult cases. That's the problem, right? I mean, that seems to me to be a problem. And as for the rape myth, I think we can't understate how dangerous the position is at the moment. Know what is happening to our culture, what is happening to our teenage boys, and what it is that they're seeing and what it is that they believe. I think that I know of a teacher an English teacher who, you know, has been teaching kind of classic books, you know, including Othello, including Macbeth, you know, and the change in attitude of the young boys who she's teaching to the female characters in these, you know, so that when they're killed or when they die, the boys cheer, you know, as if they brought it on themselves. This is a change. It's really, I think, profoundly worrying. And it's something that we just should not be complacent about. I think we are stumbling into really, really dangerous territory, and much more should be done about it.
Gosh, that's a bit chilling, isn't it? We had an event, LWN had an event last week with Alex Davis Jones and Shyster Aziz, looking exactly around those issues of the kind of Andrew Tate-led millennial misogyny culture. So if anybody missed that, you can catch that on our website. I've got a couple more questions from the comments I'm going to fish out, and then I will hand back to Abtisam to take anybody wanting to ask a question for themselves. So if you do want to ask a question for yourself, can you please use the raise hand function? But I'm not inclined to take questions where we can't see who's asking them. So if you could possibly change your username so we can tell who you are, that would be really helpful. Thank you very much. And I'll give you a moment to do that whilst asking the next set of questions. So Maggie was asking about money laundering regulations and the Tories exempting small businesses and actually making it easier for organised crime, not less easy. So thoughts on that, please. Pauline was asking how councils are supposed to process the sheer number of asylum seekers housed in hotels currently in a broken system. Yvonne was asking how to sell Labour to traditionally solid Tory areas. She's been asked to stand as a council candidate in East Hampshire, but the Labour vote's normally about 25%. So how can we push that in the right direction? And Nina was asking, as a leader, how do you stay mindful about who is round the table and who is missing from the rooms where decisions are made? So quite a breadth there.
I mean, I think we need to look at the money laundering regulations again. I don't think that they work. You know, we need to kind of keep them under review. And sure, you know, we don't want there to be, you know, I mean, we have to kind of get the balance between getting in the way of small businesses who are trying to continue their business, but equally to make sure that, you know, the bent money is being caught at an early stage. How are councils to process all of these? Well, I mean, I agree. And of course, you know, in inner cities, the number of people that we have who new arrivals coming into the city and being absorbed into our society is already very high. I have, I think, 2 or 3 hotels in my constituency full of people from all over the world, and we have 18,000 people on the waiting list for housing already as it is, and so it is kind of more difficult in some ways for us to absorb people. On the other hand, it's easier in that quite often people will be close to at least other people from that country or family or friends, or, you know, they may be able to find a support mechanism more easily than they might do if they were out in Lincolnshire. So, you know, it's really, you know, I mean, we don't have a problem with having asylum, people who are seeking asylum in our constituency. We just don't have the money and the resources to be able to look after them, but we don't have a problem. I mean, it's fine, you know. I mean, my constituency is one of the great strengths of it is that we have people from all over the world of every type of background, all living on top of each other. It's just that we've just kind of run out of space, and unless they can give us some more money to build some more flats, then we can't fit any, that many more people in, much as we'd like to, Standing in a traditional Tory area, well, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to get over the Liberals. So when I stood in Canterbury in 2001, it had only ever been a Conservative area, never been anything else. And we had come second in 1997, ahead of the Liberals. And the point was to make sure that the anti-Tory vote all voted the same way. And the Liberals knew that, and they were desperately trying to hang on to people who'd voted Liberal. And so they put out the usual kind of lying bar charts. And we, had slogans like, vote tactically, vote Labour. They were so cross because, of course, voting tactically was supposed to be all about voting Liberal. But and we put up our own bar charts, and we put, and we just absolutely went for it. And I mean, I got within 2,000 votes of getting elected, Labour in Canterbury in 2001, and 7,000 people still wasted their votes by voting Liberal. So I think it's a kind of a question of kind of running a confident campaign and keeping going and making it clear that there is a real alternative with Labour, and that we have something to offer. And if people have confidence that their vote means something, whether that is in Hampshire or whether it is in Scotland, people will vote Labour.
I certainly hope so. Abtisam, I'm going to hand back to you to field the questions that sisters are indicating themselves.
Lovely, thank you. So I've got one that's not got their username up, so I'm not going to them. But Kat, you've got your Kat Arnold, got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for such an inspiring night. Thank you to everybody. I wanted to ask you a question, Emily. There's an awful lot of trust that has to be rebuilt into politics. I was looking at a chart the other day saying trust in our politicians at the same rate as Costa Rican politics system. So, we're very low down the chart in the UK. What would you think we would need to do to overcome that? Thanks.
So I think part of the problem with populist politics is that you make a great hullabaloo of the promise, and then you never deliver. And that in the end, that chips away at people's trust in politics. And I think that Boris Johnson kind of hit the sweet spot by standing for Mayor of London, where most Londoners didn't think that the mayor had a great deal of power and couldn't really make any difference. So it didn't really matter what he promised, and at least he was a laugh. And that, I think, was why he got re-elected. And then he kind of tried the same kind of shtick as Prime Minister. And it all kind of fell apart a little bit, but there are still populists within the Tory party who, continue to run rampage in our country. I think that it's really important that we address the lack of confidence in politics, because I think that only if people believe that politics makes a difference, that it can be better, that there is hope, only then will they vote left. Only then will they vote Labour. I think that if the Tories are able to keep the cynicism levels high, then people either don't bother to vote, or they think we might as well vote Tory. There's all politicians are the same, blah, 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 blah. We have to show that it really makes a difference. That it doesn't have to be like this, that Labour can make a difference. Just give us a chance. Just give us an opportunity to serve, and we can make a difference to our country.
Thank you, Emily. I'll go on to Vicky Seddon. Hi, Vicky. How you doing?
Hi, I'm fine, thank you. Nice to see you, Abtisam. And also, Emily, very nice to hear your position on your policies, Emily, and also about how you handle your own career. The thing I wanted to ask you about is, where do you stand on the way our democratic political systems are and how it needs changing or not? Where do you stand on all of that?
I believe in members of Parliament representing an area and there not being anyone else. I want to represent a geographical area and for all of my constituents to know that I'm their MP. They don't necessarily like me, but they do all know that I'm their MP, and they know where to go. And they have I'm absolutely accountable to them more than anyone else. It's my name and Labour on the ballot paper, and they decide whether they want me or not. I don't want to have a constituency where, I mean, I used to share an office with with one of the MEPs for London, and whilst he was, you know, really high profile as MEPs went, none of my constituents knew that he was their MEP, but they knew who I was. And I think that actually, when we're talking about cynicism about politics, I think that it is important for people to know who their member of parliament is. Now, I do appreciate that there are people who live in seats that, you know, have only ever been Tory, or, you know, they feel that their vote is wasted. But we can see that things change over time, and it is a question of, you know, of fighting your corner and building up support. I do think that can happen, and I don't think that we should. I mean, I'm saying this in a long-winded way. I don't believe in PR. I don't believe in PR. I mean, I think that, you know, it might be appropriate for an upper chamber, but not for the lower chamber. In the lower chamber, you need to know who your MP is, and you need to give them hell.
So even though the Labour Party itself, large numbers of people in the majority in the Labour Party is pushing for that position, you're not taking it on board?
Well, you've asked me what I think. That's what I think. Okay. You know, I think it's better. I think it's best that we have a system where you have direct accountability to your constituents. You know, that's what I think.
Thanks, Emily. Maggie, you've got a question?
Hi, good evening, everybody. Hi, Maggie Colsard. I'm a member of Brussels Labour still, and I wanted to say congratulations to Abtisam on becoming the candidate. We're delighted to see you there. Emily knows Brussels Labour, having been over here on various occasions. And
I know you, Maggie.
Indeed you do. And I just wanted to say to Abtisam, remember, we're here. If you want to come and see us, we'd be delighted to see you. We'd be delighted to put you in touch with people in sister parties. So we're here, and there are people around you who know how to get a hold of us. I'm not on the committee now, but I have been, so you'll be welcome anytime. Thanks.
Thank you. That's really helpful to know. Thank you. Okay.
It's a great brains trust, actually, if I may say, Brussels Labour, and they have a huge amount of information, and yeah, definitely worth bearing in mind, because they're really helpful and welcoming.
Thank you, Maggie. I'll definitely reach out. So I might drop you an email.
Sure, anytime.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions? We've got no more, I think, in the hands up, Claire. But I think maybe a couple have come up in the chat about politics starting on earlier in life.
Yes, so there was one from Anita Thacker about, you know, any advice you would give to women who might perhaps have not had opportunities to pursue politics earlier in life, but find themselves drawn to it later on. Yeah, I think that's the only final.
So I mean, as I say, I stood for Parliament when I was 45. I'd stood when I was a few years before, presumably 40, when I stood in Canterbury, 41, and I hadn't stood before. And I think it was a positive advantage, because I did have a hinterland, I did have other experience of life. It helped to kind of maybe keep things in proportion a bit more. So I don't think you're ever too old. And I think that you need to remember that there's nothing magic about it. You just have to be a really good representative of your community, and you need to be able to listen to them, and you need to be able to speak up on their behalf. That's it. You know, I remember I mean, I go and ask kids in my primary schools, you know, how do you think I got my job? Because it's so revealing, you know, all the things that people think that an MP has to do, you know, and the things they say, you know, did I go on a course? Have I done this? But my favourite was the boy who said, "Did you marry Tony Blair?" None of those things.
Brilliant. Some of you will know my other half is also in the shadow cabinet, and he frequently goes around the constituency and gets mistaken for Prince William, and then they are all gutted when he turns out to just be Jonathan Reynolds. Nina, did we miss your question? Was that about being mindful of who is round the table and who might be missing from a room? So that one, yes.
I believe so. Hi there.
Hiya.
Hi. Sorry, I can't see you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you are. Yes. Hello. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you for a really inspiring talk. You know, I too come from quite humble beginnings, so it's very great for us to hear that actually, you know, don't limit ourselves. And, you know, if you feel that you're doing it for the right reasons, just go for it. So that's been really inspiring to hear. But my question still is, like, you know, having said that, like, you know, for me, to learn more about labor values and principles, I had to enter a certain profession and get to know more about it. And in the meantime, there was a lot of influence in my Gareth and Eppley's community from the local Tory councillors and Tory MPs. So they did a lot of outreach work with my community, although my values were lying with the Labour, you know, party. And I had to literally say to my community, actually, I will come out of it because these are the reasons I believe that I want to join Labour instead of like following what everybody in my community was doing. But I did feel that there was a lot of outreach work that could have done by my local Labour Party, and I have fed that back to my local Labour leaders in Medway, and they have listened, and they will be coming to our community events and all of that. But yeah, my question is, how does Labour reflect on their work, on their practice and their campaigns to make sure that people who might be representative of the community, especially in very diverse areas, but they do not yet have any agenda or, you know, any outreach work going on to those local communities. So how does Labour look at who's at the table, who's still missing, and what needs to be done?
I think what it comes to in the end, the most important thing about politics is that you have to always have an open mind, and you have to always remember that the public knows more than you do, and that you have to listen to them and learn from them, and that the answers are usually there. And there are certain parts of the public where it's easier to get in touch with them than others. And one of the ways that you do it, obviously, is just randomly by knocking on doors and seeing who opens the door. But there are certain communities that don't necessarily open the door. You know, I mean, just like, you know, teenage boys, the number of times I've knocked on a door and a teenage boy has said, "Oh, hang on, Mum," you know, but I want to talk to them as well. You know, and it's the same with other, you know, other communities from various ethnic minorities that have not got particularly involved in politics, or, you know, parliamentary politics or local council politics. It's the same thing. It's quite difficult to get, you know, to get to talk to people. Sometimes an issue will draw them in. I remember one of the earliest times when I had just been selected as a candidate, and there's an estate in my constituency that is incredibly deprived, perhaps the most deprived in my constituency, and the housing association decided to take down all their dishes, you know, so that they couldn't, at the time they were able to beam in television from all over the world, because the people in this estate came from all over the world. And suddenly the local authority decided that the housing association decided that they looked messy and took them all down, and people were outraged, absolutely outraged. And, you know, and I went round and talked to people, and at that point everyone opened their doors. Come in, they would say, you know, yes, I come from the Central African Republic, and we get this television program. Well, we did until last Thursday, and the housing, and just suddenly there was just, so that was a, you know, and then that way I got to know that estate, and I still know that estate because we got it sorted out for them, you know, but it was like, sometimes it's the issue that will bring people in. Sometimes you try and do the general outreach, but you're right. Sometimes one of the ways to do it is to find someone from a less representative community and show that, you know, and listen to them and learn from them, but also to use them as an example of people who are welcomed, so that people know that others are welcome too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Shall I bring in some of the hands that we've got that are up? Okay, so Beck and then Sarah after.
Hi there.
Hello, Beck.
Hi. So Emily, I was on a call probably about a year ago with a barrister who's also an MP for the Conservative Party. And he said, if you're a lawyer thinking about going into politics, go and lie down in a dark room until the moment passes. And, the point he was making was the challenges of making a political decision when you might know that that's legally precarious or likely to be challenged or likely to waste resources. And I won't say the specific MP because that's not fair. But I wondered, on the other side of that, how you thought, and this is relevant to Abtisam, of course, and her background, how you thought having a legal background, having that legal knowledge positively informed what you did and your work.
Oh, I think having a legal training has been really helpful personally. I mean, there are other trainings I'm sure that are helpful too, but I'm of the view we don't have enough lawyers in Parliament. I mean, others don't believe that, but I think, you know, we could do with more lawyers. I mean, my legal training helped me with a certain discipline, I think. I think that I'm a bit hyperactive, and I think my legal training actually kind of honed me in, helped me to focus, helped me to kind of, you know, get a handle on that. Also, being able to deal with large amounts of information and boil it down to the sort of the essentials, I think was also kind of part of a legal training. I think also being a barrister, you are answerable only to yourself. You're only as good as your last case. It gives you a certain toughness, which I think, you know, has helped me. And I'm not afraid to talk, which, you know, is also probably quite a helpful sort of, and I'm not afraid of legislation. You know, I mean, I can read a bill, you know, and I can write an amendment, you know, all of that sort of stuff. I mean, all of that kind of, I mean, listen, if you're not a lawyer, you can get other people to help you with that kind of thing. But and when I first was elected into Parliament, you know, I was used to being in a male dominated environment as well, frankly. And I was used to that kind of level of aggression, you know, that came with it. So it wasn't as shocking for me as it was for other people who perhaps came from other backgrounds. But I would not say don't become a politician because, you know, because the legislation you might be passing will be controversial or shot down by the courts. You know, I think that if you're thinking that that's kind of how things are going to be, then it just shows how far the Tories have got from, you know, the norm. If they think that, you know, their legislation is such that they're actually now trying to pass legislation which they know is illegal. As I say, they even give it the name, you know, the illegal immigration. No, that's why they're just playing games with the legal system.
I'm just going to bring in Sarah. Sarah, we're almost out of time, so if you could keep your question.
A really quick question.
Lovely, thank you.
This is about diversity and representation, looking at barriers to accessing. So I'm autistic. I know that there are people with physical disabilities, but the physical structure of Parliament and how we run it doesn't invite people like me to come and be part of the system. And it means that we lack it. How is Labour going to change that? And how are we going to make it financially accessible? Because unless you have a professional background or you're a union member, how do you fund a campaign to be selected? So we're missing people at the table because we've got barriers that are structural and physical. And how is Labour going to do something about that?
It's a big question, Emily, but very briefly.
Yeah, I mean, all I would say, the one thing I would say, there are lots of bits there and I don't have the answer to all of it. But one thing I would say is that the most important part of a selection is not a flashy video or anything else. It's going around and seeing people individually and asking for their support. and listening to what they have to say and learning from them. And sometimes, you know, the membership may be 200 and sometimes they may be 3,000, you know, but that's the work you have to do if you want to be selected to be a parliamentary candidate. And that doesn't necessarily cost anything apart from the cost in your time.
True, thank you, Emily. Claire, am I passing back over to you now?
I think so. Not least so I can say a massive thank you to you, Abtisam, for guiding us through such a fascinating evening so ably, and of course to Emily for just being your usual frank and fearless self. I think that both you sisters are real inspirations to us, not just in what you have to say, but in the way that you have to say it. And I am very excited to see Emily go on to become not a shadow senior minister, but a cabinet minister in a Labour government. I am very confident that Abtisam will not be far behind her, and I'm sure that good things will happen for vulnerable communities because of voices like yours under a Labour government. So thank you both so much for giving us your time and your thoughts this evening. Thank you to our audience as well for coming along and for staying throughout the night. If you would like to enjoy some more LWN events, we will be meeting again on Thursday with Ellie Reeves talking about parenting and politics, and then again next week with Ali McGovern and Nan Sloan and Kieran Mayhill talking about the centenary of the first 3 Labour women MPs coming into Parliament, Dorothy Jewson, Susan, and of course Margaret Bonfield, the working class trade unionist who went on to become the first ever female cabinet minister. A little bit later next month in April, we're going to have a support Zoom for any of you who are running as council candidates in the run to the May elections, to create a nice space for you to regroup and offload. And we'll also have another virtual meetup for LWN members across the country to touch base with one another and share some positive success stories for work you're doing on women's representation locally. If you are interested in standing for Parliament, anybody on the Zoom, we also have monthly workshops coming up on how to understand Labour's selection process week by week. Or a little bit later in summer, we will have another residential, which it takes you through quite intensively the thought processes and strategies for how to get selected. And we also have applications open now today for our next Making Your Mark course, which talks you through how to sharpen your political narrative and how to understand what makes you special and memorable in politics, and how to basically talk about your personal narratives and your political motivations with the poise and confidence that Emily and Abtisam have done this evening. So all of the details of that you can find on our website, lwn.org.uk. If you're not a member, we would love you to join us, because we are only as powerful as our number, and every single new member helps us amplify our roar and our ability to create a feminist campaigning space within the Labour Party and train brilliant and diverse and low-income women for public office. Equally, if any of you is sitting on loads of dosh and doesn't know what to do with it, we would be delighted to take it off your hands. You can find the donate button on our website. And please do follow us on social media as well. And if you can't chuck us a fiver, a retweet will have the same effect and be just as appreciated. But thank you all very much indeed. Have a fabulous local elections for everybody who is fighting them. And once again, a huge sisterly thank you to the brilliant Emily and the fabulous Abtisam. Thank you all and good night.